ceremonia. Use my fangs to murder ya. Yo soy la diosa, los demonios no me controlan. Soy culebra. What is up, everyone? Octoberz here. Welcome to another episode of Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue. This is season 6 finale. Technically, it's episode 21. I kind of counted all the episodes I did this season, and this is my longest season I've ever had. It's been a crazy ride, fun ride as well. Ups and downs, of course, this year, but more ups and downs, of course. I got to see my blessings. So I want to thank everybody who's been tuning in to every episode. If you've only watched certain episodes, either way, I appreciate everybody's support. I kind of wanted to recap the season. Shout out to all the guests, give everybody their individual shout outs, and show a little bit of a recap of some of the interviews I've done throughout the year. And again, this is my longest running season that I've had. Usually, if you've watched episodes from the past, the seasons ran really short. I think at most one season only had like 6 episodes because I took like a break. And then I think the other ones were about 10 episodes or so. And so I kind of want to also recap the journey of Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue for those who haven't been watching from the beginning. So kind of to give you a little bit of a brief history of Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue and me as 7 Octoberz. Also what to look for the future seasons of Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue. I'm still kind of trying to think about what's going to happen, so I'm going to recap that as well. But I'll start off by how I started Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue. So it started off as a blog, written blog. It was Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue, and that started, I opened the Instagram page in 2018, December, and my goal was just to do album reviews and movie reviews. That's all I had in mind. I didn't really think about where it was going at that time because I love music and I love movies and I love all genres and all that stuff. And that's why I keep forgetting to say this, but like one of the taglines that I want to start using is Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue is where genres have no borders. That's always like stuck to me because I feel like that's pretty much who I am and encapsulates who I am because I love music, movies in general. But of course, a lot of people know me as loving horror and hip hop. And of course, those are my favorites, but I love music, like all genres, almost all genres. I know there's some that I don't like. And then same thing with movies. I love mostly all genres, but there's some that I stick to most, of course, like horror being my top 5 of the genres. Same thing for hip hop being the top 5 of my music genres. But pretty much when I started Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue, again, it was just to do mainstream album reviews and movie reviews, just because I've always talked about them with friends and I would do them here and there, but it wasn't nothing serious. And so I just decided, let me start a blog where I can share my opinions of what I love and share it with others. And so from there, I was already kind of involved, slowly getting involved in the hip hop scene here in San Diego, the underground scene. I like to call it more independent instead of underground. And I fell in love with the community here in San Diego, and it's still thriving as well. And so I started going to a lot of hip hop shows. And in 2019, like January, is when I actually went live with the blog. And I was reviewing, like I said, mainstream albums, mainstream hip hop albums, and mainstream horror movies. And here and there, obviously indie horror movies, but with hip hop, I didn't really know a lot of like. I knew independent artists, but nobody here from San Diego until I started going to these events and kind of pretty much saying who I was, what I wanted to do, and then something like clicked in me that I was like, man, I have this new platform I just started. I want to interview artist here from the community here from San Diego. And so that's how kind of Nightmare on Sedgwick that's where the grassroots or whatever you want to call it started. I started interviewing hip hop artists here from San Diego, and it was written interviews. And then like mid 2019 is when I moved to audio interviews. And from that, it was kind of funny because I didn't have any like setup like I have now, or equipment, should I say. I was just using my MacBook, recording right from the speaker. I have no mic, nothing like that. Just meeting up with these hip hop people, rappers, artists, and just kind of, asking them questions because I've been in love, like I said, with hip hop for a long time since I was like a kid, 7 years old. Same thing with horror movies or just movies and music in general. I fell in love with like at 7 or so years old. So I've kind of known the history of those two genres. Of course, there's a lot to learn still. I don't know everything, but pretty much I kind of got involved with like interviewing these artists, getting to, tell their stories and stuff like that. And from there, Actually, sorry, kind of tracking a little bit back before I get further on into the story. And then for those listening in Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue, if you've been listening, you kind of know what the name means. But for those that are might be new, Nightmare derived from Nightmare on Elm Street, Sedgwick Avenue, where the first hip hop party took place in the Bronx in New York. So when I was thinking about the names of like that I wanted to do hip hop and horror reviews, I kind of wanted to blend those two genres. And I was just thinking of unique names, and Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue just stuck. Nightmare on Elm Street, I love that film. It's not like it's like here. Sometimes it's on my top 5, sometimes it's not. It's just like my top 5. Same thing for like hip hop albums, hip hop rappers, all that always changes. But I just thought the name sounded really dope, and of course, I do love Nightmare on Elm Street, and then Sedgwick Avenue, of course. The history again. I know I'm a kind of like a history buff when it comes to that type of stuff. I like I said, I don't know everything, but I do love to research what I'm getting into. So back to the story. So I started doing audio interviews with these artists, and I kind of already had a knack, I guess, for technology and stuff like that, because I've been doing music for a while too. Nothing like that I was taking serious, but this is an outlet for me to do music, and I was self-recording myself. So I had certain equipment. I wasn't using it just yet for my audio interviews, and I just started doing a lot of research, like how to, I got Anchor, and that's how I pretty much decided to like put my audio out there. And from there, Anchor distributes to all these other social audio platforms like Spotify, iTunes, all that stuff. And obviously not iTunes, is the Apple Music now. So all these things. So from there, that was in mid 2019 when I was doing those audio podcasts. And I was, like I said, I focused more on the hip hop community because that was what I was, or the community that I was in at that moment. And that's where I was meeting a lot of these people. And then I started to think, like, how am I going to incorporate the horror side? Because I was interviewing a lot on the hip hop side. And I was on the horror side. What I was doing is I was just doing movie reviews, because at the time I didn't really have, or at least think of like, oh, well, let me reach out to this director or this person. I was just kind of like, let me do this, because I was too focused and also involved in the hip hop community. I was going to shows. I was part of it as far as like I said, interviewing, doing album reviews for them as well, not just interviews. And then I started I did a couple written interviews with a couple people from the horror community. Like I did one of the representatives from Fangoria. I can't even think of the top of my name right now. I interviewed a couple people too, like that I met at like horror conventions, like artists that would sell horror items. So I did part of that, but still it wasn't like where I was interviewing them via audio yet, because like I said, I was doing those for people that were here, because at the time I still didn't know how to do like the video podcast, which I'll get to in a second. So it was just kind of my immediate community where I was doing these interviews. And then I decided, I'm like, I really want to do video, because it'd be dope too to also I was like a fan. Like I said, I've been a fan of hip hop, so I am into like watching interviews. Like Rob Markman is one of my favorite hip hop journalists. Shout out to him, because he was on the podcast. And I just love watching like interviews. Like that's one of my things. I've been doing that since like I was probably like in high school or college. So I've been kind of following along, like, the Joe Budden podcast, obviously knowing now with Drink Champs, but like all like the beginning of podcasting, and even not even podcasting, but just shows where journalists would interview hip hop artists, even since like the MTV days. I was just always, I always loved the fact that they would interview these artists, get to know them on a deeper level. And I was always intrigued by that. And I kind of wanted to do something where I was part of the hip hop community and part of the culture, and somewhere where I can contribute. And that's what kind of that love came from as well, like trying to storytell these artist stories. And so I always wanted to do that. And I looked up to the greatest, like I said, some of the best, like I said, Rob Markman, Sway in the Morning, like Angie Martinez, like all these different people in the hip hop community that are really well known for doing great interviews. And even outside of hip hop, there's other dope interviewers or journalists, whatever you want to call them, like Zane Lowe. At the top of my head right now, the guy from Hot Ones too. Like there's so many different ones that I kind of look at and see like how they interview, because I love when they ask questions that nobody's ever asked the artist. So that's kind of where I come from as well. Like I wouldn't say I come from that era, but I come from pretty much, I love those journalists that do their research, that try to ask interesting questions, unique questions that haven't been asked. Because I think that makes an interview so much doper. And even like there's a Mexican I don't even know if he would be considered a journalist now, but he's a podcaster now. Jordi Rosado, he does really dope interviews as well with artists because he's also involved in the entertainment community. He came from like Otro Rollo, for those who might have grown up in that era, like Adal Ramones. He had this show. It was like a Mexican kind of talk show, I guess, but kind of in a different format, more like SNL vibes mixed with like Jimmy Fallon, maybe, if I ever had to like give it a name. But I kind of, like I said, I grew up watching all that stuff actually like since I was like a kid all the way to like now as an adult. So all that I think maybe was instilled in me now that I'm kind of recapping this, kind of like an epiphany I'm having right here. But pretty much I always loved that, the fact that they build these connections with these artists, and some of them open up to them just because they have that connection, that they've known them for years, or they just do really great research on these artists and have really great interviews. And so when I did decide to do audio and then move on to video, I decided I was like, I want to be like those people. Like, obviously I'm going to have my own type of vibe, my own type of questions, all this stuff. But I really looked up to those people. So I wanted to have great interviews like that. And I hope that for those that have been listening into my podcast, that they've gotten something like that from the interviews. Because what I've gotten from the people that I just mentioned, journalists, podcasters, all that, is that you get gems from these interviews, not just from the artist, also from the person that's interviewing, but from both. And then you take something from it that you can pretty much take on with you and apply it to your life. And I hope that people have gotten that, while watching some of these episodes. I know it's happened to me myself as a podcaster now, and just as an artist overall, like building these connections with these artists, in the creative community, all that stuff, like really deep connections, and even learning stuff about myself doing this podcast and doing the other podcasts that I do with my sister, The Heartful Truth. So it's been a really, like I said, a crazy journey. Not just this year, but like pretty much the whole time since I started. Like I said, it was like 2018 when I had the idea, 2019 when I pretty much implemented it. To kind of bring us to current date, October 2020 is when I started the video podcast. I had to go back kind of and look, because it's all kind of been a blur, but it's been, like I said, a really fun journey with ups and downs, and again, more ups than downs. So pretty much October 2020 is when I decided to take it to the next level. And pretty much I self-taught myself how to use this program called OBS with some friends at the time that we were just like trying to figure out like how can we up our game in the podcasting, So I learned it in like a day, I want to say, like OBS. And I was like, okay, I'm like addicted to this thing. So I really loved it. The fact that I was able now to do video, and I started to get more, I guess, confident and reaching out to people. Because like I said, I was reaching out to the most immediate people here just to do them in person. But then I decided, I'm like, now that I can do video, I can talk to anybody all over the world. And so from there, that's where I started to reach out to people through the social platforms. And like I said, like the worst thing that they can say is no or ignore you. And so I just started like DMing artists that were on my bucket list. And of course, Nightmare on Sedgwick is like for independent people. I'm an independent artist myself. So of course, I want to give limelight to the independent artists. But of course, I also love, like I said, these two cultures, hip hop and horror. And so of course, I want to reach out to people that I grew up watching their movies, or even actors. Same thing with the hip hop, like hip hop artists, pioneers that I look up to, all this stuff. Of course, I want to have that as well. I want to make a blend of it, because if you've seen my this last season, which I'm going to shout out all the artists that I've had and all the creatives. Some of them are independent, some of them are well known in the mainstream. Either way, I want to blend the both because that's what I love. And so I hope that, like I said, that's what you guys got from the season and the past seasons. That's what it's been as well for me. Like I always wanted to give limelight to people that might not have, that I might not be on the biggest podcast, or, or have the limelight because they might be not like a famous director or a famous hip hop artist. I still want to do that, but I also do want to interview the legends in the games, whether it's hip hop and horror, either community. So without further ado, let me just give a huge shout out to the guest for this season 6 again. Season 5, going on to season 6. The first episode of season 5, shout out to Kristen Noriega. She's a director. She's an actress. She's a writer. She does a little bit of everything. So shout out to her. And she's based out of New York. So again, it's really been dope to be able to build this community for people that are not just here in San Diego, but all over the world. And it's been amazing getting to know these people. And it's building a whole community too, because I'm mixing these two genres that I love. And I think some people, I could be wrong, people can correct me wrong if I'm wrong in the comments, but I feel like I've kind of created a bridge too. And again, I'm not the one that, created hip hop and horror, because that's been in history as well. And that's stuff that I talk about throughout in my podcast, where like, it's always been, they've had stuff together, hip hop and horror. They're more alike than they're different. And there's a bunch of like hip hop and horror movies that you can look up, and it's been in existence for a long time. But I'm saying, as far as like me creating a bridge with like now when I interview people, I'm hoping that like Kristen Noriega is following like, an Indigo Wave, who's another artist that I had on this podcast. So like making like just creating that bridge as far as like, oh, okay, so they didn't know who this was, but because they were on our podcast, they saw this next episode and they follow this other person, and it's just creating like different connections, which I hope that's what's happening as what I've seen. And I could be wrong. But yeah, shout out to Kristen Noriega for being on the podcast. Really dope person as well. She has a really dope short film, and I know she's probably working on other stuff. I haven't talked to her in a minute, but thank you also for Kristen for supporting my art. She copped merch from me, t-shirt from Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue, so I appreciate that. That means a lot. So shout out to, Kristen. And then let me go to the second episode. Let me just pull it up for you guys here. And this was like a huge deal for me too, because like I said, I'm a hip hop fan. So I've been following hip hop for the longest time, like since I was 7 years old, and I'm 34 now. So this second guest, and actually it was a double. And actually, I think it was the first, if I'm not mistaken, the first time I have two guests on Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue video. So let me share my screen here. So I had shout out to Chino Excel and Gift Revolver. Chino Excel, of course, hip hop legend, living legend. When I booked him, I was like super excited. It was, like I said, something off my bucket list. So I thank Chino Excel for being so down to earth. Thank you. I appreciate you. He has one of the dopest albums in 2023. If you haven't heard it, you have to go check that out. And then also shout out to Gift Revolver, who's his graphic artist for his comic book, and he's another dope human being as well. I really wanted to meet them in person. That was one of my goals. It wasn't like necessarily this year, but I did want to meet them in person because like this was virtual. They live up north. I was just like really psyched to have them on. And so I was kind of manifesting, like, I hope I see them. They announced that they were going to be at Comic-Con. And for those that might not know the story, I've never been inside Comic-Con. I've only been outside of Comic-Con because there's a lot of free stuff here if you live in San Diego. And that was going to be my goal. I was just going to go and explore outside. And so that was kind of my plan. And then shout out to Cinnabeth from Film Geeks and KPBS. She pretty much hit me up like literally like last minute and said that she needed help. And that's how I got in this year for the first time ever into Comic-Con, which is a really dope experience that I had. Shout out again to Cinnabeth. And because of that, I got to meet Chino and Gift Revolver in person. And I should have had a clip here. Maybe I'll add it after the fact. I'll edit here a picture that we took together. But it was really dope to see them. They're really down to earth guys, like I said. Really great comics that they got to check them out. So right here, shout out to Cochise MC and another hip hop legend, Architect, DJ Architect, who's a legendary producer. He's DJ'd for like Souls of Mischief. Also, he's he collabed with like artists like Coolio. He's produced for him. Rest in peace, Coolio. He's just like a legendary producer. If you look him up, I don't want to give too much away. I don't want to ramble on, like I said, in this episode, but shout out to both of them. Coach is a really dope MC, again, from the Bay Area, as well as DJ Architect is a legend in the Bay Area. And I was really lucky enough to have both of them on again on this podcast. So another bucket list right there. Shout out to Coaches for actually getting him on, because I didn't even know that they had this connection and he wanted to be on the podcast. And I've been following his journey for Coaches. Again, another independent rapper from the Bay Area, really dope. And he was like, can we bring on DJ Architect? I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it. And so it was a really dope conversation as well. I found out that, DJ Architect and Coaches are both like really horror fans as well. So that's what the other stuff that I've gotten to do too, is like when I have a hip hop artist or artists together in the podcast, I find out that they also love horror, or vice versa. I have a horror maybe director who's into hip hop or have some sort of connection. And then the third episode here is going to be Indica Wave, really dope artist. And like I said, in this episode, I don't really like to put her in one box because she does a little bit of everything. She does hip hop, R&B, other type of genres. And that's what I really liked about her when I reached out to her. She's another independent artist, and I believe she's based in New York as well. So I reached out to her as well. I found her through Instagram, I think. And I really love what she's doing. So shout out to Indica Wave. She just has a new single called Anxiety. I can relate because I deal with anxiety. A really dope track. I love that she's, using her music to inspire people. That's another thing that I really loved about her music. It's to inspire people, motivate people. She talks about real life stuff. And I'm a huge person about lyricism, like I said, anxiety, talking about mental health. So shout out to Indica Wave. She was a really dope guest to have. And we also have the same birthday, which is really dope, June 15th. So shout out to Indica. Really, really dope interview. Like I said, check all of these out. Not even just season 5, but all the seasons that I've done. And then there's the audio ones. They are on all the streaming platforms. When I started, like I said, I started first the audio. So for season 1 and season 2 of my podcast, season 1 of my podcast, audio is on all streaming platforms. Everything else from season 2 up to season 5, they're all on YouTube if you guys want to watch the video. And actually, Spotify, I believe, also has the video now, because they have that option now, or that feature. Shout out to the horror dude, another really dope. He has makes horror props, and I found him as well through Instagram. I forgot honestly how I came across this page. Actually, no, I remember. I went to I think it was CreepyCon, where I saw his booth. I didn't get to actually introduce myself in person, but I thought he had a really dope booth. It was Chucky, it looked like pretty much all these props. He had Chucky, he had, I can't even remember, it might have been Jason, and I just thought it was dope. So I think I took a picture of his booth, and then I looked him up on Instagram, started following him. Really love what he was doing. He does these by hand, and in this actual interview, he had that burnt Chucky from Child's Play 1 that he pretty much created himself. Obviously he bought the doll, and then he pretty much added all these special makeup and stuff like that. So really dope dude as well. No pun intended, but again, I hit him up. He said yes, and it was really a great conversation as well. He really dropped a lot of really dope gems. So shout out to the horror dude. And so that was episode 5. Episode 6, I had executive producer of In Search of Darkness, Robin Block. Really dope dude. I forget where he's based out of, but I know he's on the other side of the world. And he was really dope. I hit him up because In Search of Darkness, for those that might not know, that might not be into horror, it's a horror documentary, and this is, I think he's on the 3rd one already. He's working on the 4th one, and it's 4 hours each. Almost each documentary is 4 hours of just horror history. And the first couple that he did was, or the first, I think 3 that he did was on the 80s horror, and it goes in depth. If you're a horror nerd like myself, it's really dope. Even if you're not, it's a lot of dope stuff that you'll learn. And I fell in love with that documentary. I think it's one of the best horror documentaries that I've seen, at least in my opinion. And so I was trying to see who I could interview that was part of this project. And I think I just messaged the Instagram page for In Search of Darkness. I think it's 80s Horror Doc. And they gave me his info. We set it up. Really, like I said, really dope dude. And then this is another one where he has a connection with hip hop that I didn't know. was that he's done some hip hop documentaries. So that was really dope, that connection. And he's like a hip hop fan as well, which was really dope to find out while doing this interview. Again, shout out to Robin Block. Thank you for your time. And hopefully we'll talk again. And hopefully actually we talked about like having the director on the podcast. So that's another bucket list there. But shout out to Robin Block. And yeah, like I said, it's been a wild ride. I'm sorry if like I'm butchering some of the introductions. I've been going through a lot as well, like with the loss of my grandpa. So my memory is not the best right now, but I want to make sure that I wanted to shout out everybody. And so just in case I messed it up, that's why I'm trying to like remember everything. And also it's been, like I said, a long year. So trying to remember everything that happened is kind of like, I'm recapping it right now. And it's like been a dope ride, like I said. And so the next one, episode 7, shout out to the Paranormal Putas. Shout out to them, really dope ladies from Texas. I found them, I think, as well on Instagram. I went down the rabbit hole. Like I said, I'm always trying to find new indie people, either in the hip hop or horror community. Like I said, I'm a nerd when it comes to this stuff. It might look like I do not have a job, but I do have a 9-to-5. But somehow I find the time to do this because this is what I love to do, and this is what I eventually want to make a career of. And I'm gonna say I am gonna make a career of this because I'm trying to manifest it, or I am manifesting it. But yeah, Paranormal Putas are really dope. I found them. I think I was trying to find out like more people in the paranormal community, and I came across their page somehow, and they're really dope, really funny ladies. And yeah, it was a really dope episode that I had with them. And thank you guys, or thank you ladies, for having me on your podcast, the Paranormal Putas podcast. Check them out as well. They have their podcast where they talk to people about their paranormal stories. I call them like paranormal historians because what they're doing is really dope. They're taking these, these stories of people that may never be heard, and they're actually getting them out there. And they also have their own paranormal stories as well. They had me on theirs because I shared my one and only paranormal story I have. I mean, I've had some incidents here and there now, but one of the biggest ones that stood out to me was when I was in 6th grade, and I had an encounter with a duende. For those that might not speak Spanish, like a dwarf, or whatever. There's so many different types of names that you call them, but I never really saw it. It was a shadow, but I won't give too much away. You can tune into their episode that I was on, and maybe I'll share the description, the link in the description here in this video, so you can listen to the full story. And that episode I share with the Sustos podcast. Shout out to him as well. He also shares some knowledge about dwarves and his encounter, or his paranormal story of a duende. But it's really dope episode. So I thank you guys for having me on your podcast. But yeah, again, check out Paranormal Putas. They were really dope to have on the podcast. Really fun. Next one, this would be episode 8. I had shout out to Cam Archer. He's a really dope indie rapper from the Inland Empire up north in California. And he's also into horror as well, which that I knew because he has some references in his music, especially like he's wearing a ghost face, so he's a huge Scream fan. So shout out to Cam Archer, really dope lyricist. And congrats to him. He just won an award, I think, for the best verse for the Inland Empire Awards. So shout out to him. Really dope convo as well. Again, he's a really dope artist. Check out his music. Again, a lot of these people that I've had is you kind of see a pattern, like either some might be big names, some are not, but either way, like I feel like they are really dope at what they do. They take their art seriously. They're really humble. And so that's kind of what I kind of gravitate towards. So I hope that, like I said, you guys check out these episodes if you haven't. It's a lot of gems dropped throughout each episode. And I'm not just saying it because it's my podcast, but I really took a lot. I took something from each episode. So shout out to Cam Archer. Next here, let's see here. Next is shout out to Bugsy H. And again, he's another dope rapper, indie rapper. And right now I'm like, my mind is foggy, but I want to say he's from Boston. I'm like, I might have butchered, so I'm sorry, man. But shout out to Bugsy, really dope artist as well. I copped one of his projects, Travis County, I think 3 vinyl. It was a really, like, I shouted him out because it was like a really dope idea how he did his merch bundle and everything. Like, again, I look for these things because that's what I gravitate towards, people that like really love what they do. They take their art seriously. They care about their fans. They're just like humble people. And his thing was like the presentation of his merch bundle was dope. He had like an apron because it's kind of like inspired by kind of like Texas Chainsaw. So I had like the apron. He had like a pin. Obviously the vinyl. It was a dope presentation. So shout out to Bugsy H. I know we haven't talked in a minute, but shout out to you. Like, thank you for being part of the podcast. So check him out as well. Really dope artist. That was episode 9. So almost halfway through the season here. And like I said, this is the longest season I've had. I was on a roll. A lot of these I recorded at the beginning of the year. For those that might be interested in how it works, for at least for my podcast, I stack episodes. So even if you listen through some of the conversation, I'll say like, this is when the episode's going to drop, or like, we're filming this right now and it's going to drop here. Because I just makes it easier for me. Like I said, I have a regular job as well. So trying to keep up all that stuff, I'm just kind of trying to keep myself organized. So I do stack episodes and then I drop them, and it just makes it easier for me. So a lot of these interviews I did in the beginning of the year, and then I've been dropping throughout the year. But yeah, so this next one here is episode 10, and I'm really proud of this one as well. His name is Bomani J. Story. He's a director, writer, producer, and he just dropped in the beginning. I would say not even the beginning, maybe like May or June. Right now, I can't even think when it actually dropped. But The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster, really dope film. It's a different perspective of like the Frankenstein tale, and with the female Black protagonist. I just thought it was dope when I first saw the trailer, and so I saw it, and I was like, I need to find out who's directing this. So I can have them on the podcast. Like I said, everything, I've just reached out to people. I'm really an introvert. I'm shy, but like I said, I love what I do. I love music. I love movies. So I just kind of go for it. And it took a while for me to be this kind of confident. I still have my days where I doubt myself, but I was like, I'm going to find out. I found out he was the director. Really dope dude as well. Again, humble. We had a really great conversation about his movie, and I recommend it. Really dope film. It came out this year. I believe it's already on all, like not all streaming, but pretty much you can rent it, I believe. So check it out. The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster. Really dope film. Like I said, if you're a fan of like Frankenstein, is with that vibe, but with the modern twist. So shout out to Bomani. Like, again, really, really dope interview. I still can't believe that I got to interview him. Really dope. And that was episode 10. So we're halfway there. This next episode is one of, I'm not going to say it's my favorite, because I feel like I gotten something from each episode and each artist creative that I've had on the podcast. It's been dope to have build something, some connection and deep conversation. But this one, it's really an impactful one, and just like the true power of like manifestation, I believe, because I've been trying to get this specific artist, rapper on my podcast. He was on my bucket list for a while, and I was like, I know I'm gonna get him. I'm just gonna take my time, because the timing has to be right as well. And so I think I had reached out once, and I didn't hear back from the person that dealt at the time with his bookings. But then I always got to shout out the queen here. Shout out to Coach K, who started booking interviews for RJ Payne, one of my favorite rappers. Right now, he's killing the game. He's been killing it for the last couple years. One of my favorite, like I said, he's independent. And when I say independent, like the full extent of the word. And I think he just announced that he's going to try to make his own studio at home. So he even probably teach himself. I don't know if he already knows how to make beats, but teach himself how to produce so he can have full control. He has his website where he sells his music, from his merch. Dope ass lyricist. Like I said, one of my favorite lyricists. And again, we have the connection. We have the same birthday. So when I got him booked finally, I was like, it was a dream come true. So again, shout out to Coach K, shout out to RJ Payne for being a dope dude as well. Because sometimes, like they say, it's kind of scary to meet the people that you look up to, or because you might never know how they are. But he's a really great dude. I can say that. And I know it's rare in this industry as well. So all the people that I've had throughout the seasons has been dope people. But shout out to RJ Payne for giving his time for me to be able to like speak with him, have a really dope conversation. I would really love to have you back if you're listening in, because it was a really great experience. But yeah, so RJ Payne, having him on the season was crazy, and I still like just looking back right now, it's crazy to me that I even had him on the podcast. But again, shout out to Coach K for making that happen. Yeah, like I said, it's been a crazy ride. So that was episode 11. It was considered kind of like a bonus episode because I dropped it around our I think I might have dropped it on our birthdays. And then the next one too, again, a lot of these episodes throughout this season is just kind of been like, I don't know what it is, like destiny, manifestation, what it is, but it was a lot of these bucket list people that I got on the podcast this season that I really wanted to get. So this next guest, episode 12, is Michelle Garza Cervera. She's the director of Huesera. And let me put her on the screen here. So Huesera stands for the Bone Woman. That's the pretty much the translation of her movie. It's a Mexican horror film, more of a supernatural film. And I don't want to give too much away. I just recommend it. It's one of my favorite films this year as well. But I've been following since like last year. I think I want to say they announced it. It was a trailer, and it was in the film festival circuit. So I've been following it, and I was like, man, I hope somehow this ends up, showing here in San Diego. And this year, for those that might not know, I ended up doing the Latino Film Festival here in San Diego for the first time I volunteered. And at first, I think they were going to play the movie. So I was excited because I was going to go see it, because as volunteers, we got to see like a couple free movies, I think, to be able to attend, because we were helping volunteer for the Latino Film Festival. And I heard they were going to play her movie, and I was like, yes, I'm going to go see it. And at first I was like kind of thinking, I'm like, man, I hope they have a Q&A, but there was nothing in the works. And then I think literally like the week of, they announced that she was going to be there with the cast. And so when we went to see the film, they had a Q&A right after. And pretty much they were there, like lingering there. Like people were coming up to them, saying how amazing the film was. I thought it was, like I said, really beautiful. The cast was great. Everybody was friendly. And I kind of, she was really, obviously, a lot of people were surrounding her. I was like, maybe I'll just like hit her up on social media. But my mom was there with me. Shout out to my mom. She was like, no, just like wait. And then, like they'll probably like leave her alone. And then you can go up to her and just talk to her real quick and just introduce yourself. I was like, okay. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go quickly to the bathroom while the line around her like dissipates. And I was like, okay. So I went with my friend. I went to the restroom real quick. And then when I came back, it was funny because my mom, like she's more of an extrovert. So she was already sitting in the bench with the freaking actresses from the film. I was just cracking up. She always makes friends with everybody. So she was over here sitting, and then she came up to me. She's like, oh, I talked to them, and they said that she should be able to talk to you, because my mom was like telling them about my podcast and all this stuff. So shout out to my mom. She was my number one fan. But yeah, so finally, like the line around her, like the crowd around her pretty much left. And I was able to introduce myself, really nice, down to earth. I told her about my podcast, that I would love to have her on. She said yes. We exchanged emails, or actually she gave me her email. I hit her up like within days, and then we scheduled something like a couple weeks after. And so shout out to Michelle, really down to earth, as well as a really dope filmmaker. I'm excited to see what else she comes up with, future projects, because it was really dope. It was a really dope film. It was an all-female cast. The messaging, like I don't want to give too much away. Like watch the interview, we talk about it. Go watch the film as well. Go support it. Go support indie, film. And of course, being Mexican, like it made me proud to see like such a dope film. I loved it. Like again, it's one of my favorite films up here of 2023. So recommend it. So again, crazy, like I said, crazy season. I'm trying to give like a little bit of. I don't want it to take too long. We're already at like 42 minutes, I think, here, but I just kind of wanted to give a brief background of how I met all these people and the connections of how it worked for those that might be interested. And also just for myself too, like to remember all the stuff that I've done throughout the year and like how all these connections were built. It's crazy to look back. This next guest here, episode 13, is Nicole Valencia. And she's also a director, writer, photographer. Again, over a lot of these, you'll notice another thing about a lot of these artists and creators that I've had on my podcast is that they are jack of all trades, or they do more than one thing. And I think as a creative myself, like I do a lot of things. So I think it's just as a creative, you always want to do so many different things to express yourself. And I don't know, it's just like a creative thing, I think, because there's so many outlets that you can go into. But yeah, she's a dope director. She directed like Honey, a short film. And again, I met her at the Latino Film Festival where she showed her film. Really dope film. Again, watch the interview. And you'll find out a little bit more about her film. And then in that description, I do share like her website as well of that in that interview, so you can go check it out as well to see. I don't know if she has it yet on streaming, but again, shout out to Nicole. Next episode here, episode 14. Again, another bucket list that I've been following. This dope family who does like horror films together. And ironically, they're called the Addams Family. And like I said, no pun intended in the interview. But I guess they told me the fun fact that it was the first time that they were interviewed all together, I think. Because I think they all live in different parts, or at least Zelda lives on a different part of the world from her parents. I don't know if they live together now, but I just think it's dope that, you know, this family does horror films together. Like they direct, write, act, all that. And like, again, indie. I love indie film. Just really cool that they do that. It's inspiring to me, me wanting to become a filmmaker. I am going to become a filmmaker, should I say it. But it's like to say like a family that makes horror films stays together, right? So at least I'm just making that up. But I think it's really dope. They were really humble, really dope to talk to. I would love to have them back. They have another project that's out right now as well. I think in the film circuit as well. So I'm looking forward to watching that and having them back on. Really had a really dope conversation. But Hellbender is pretty much the movie that got me into who they were, because I just went down the rabbit hole and I found out that it was a family that directed, wrote, acted, all that stuff. So it's really dope. So shout out to them. Shout out to Toby Poser, who's the mom. She was recently the House of Usher. I always butcher that freaking show, but I love that show by Mike Flanagan. That's on Netflix. I recommend it. She had a cameo in there, and it was really dope to see her shining on there, even though it was like a brief moment, but she killed that scene. I feel like she stole the show on that scene. And again, I really love what they're doing. I'm excited to see what else they do. Again, I heard great things of their new project too, so I'm excited to see that one too. But again, check out this interview, really dope as well. Like if you want to become a filmmaker or anything like that, like this episode will really inspire you, because it inspired me for sure. And then this next episode here, our interview, episode 15, shout out to Michael Aguirre from See It on 16 millimeter. Shout out to him. He's been killing it too, both here in California and in Texas, showing his films on 16 millimeter, and also collabing with the homie from Trash Mex. So shout out to him. And I know on here it says like episode 13, but I kind of counted everything and it's episode 15 because I pretty much had a bunch of a couple bonus episodes throughout the season. So shout out to Michael, See It on 16 millimeter. Again, he's doing great things. I think he just had his horror marathon, and that was really dope to see. Like I said, he's been killing it for this past year. Has been crazy for him and really successful, and I'm really proud to see that happening. So, you know, shout out to him. And again, really dope episode too. If you want to hear more about what he does for film screenings, all that stuff. Like I said, all of these episodes, I took something from it. And I'm pretty sure you'll take something from it as well. This next one, it was a full circle moment as well. I've been knowing Curtis King, a really dope artist in the hip hop community. Again, he's big on being an independent artist. He calls like his community DIYers, like do it yourself, you know. And I really love what he stands for as well. I've known him for the last couple years. And yeah, he's an author too, really inspirational. He has his podcast as well, always, giving out game, not gatekeeping. And so we had a really dope conversation as well. He also loves horror, which I found out as well through our conversation, which was really dope. So again, another inspirational episode. Check it out. He has really dope content as well. So like I said, you watch his interview, look up what he does as well, and then you'll go down that rabbit hole as well. Next one here is director of Bitter Murmur, a short film, and it's Manny Baeza. So shout out to Manny. Met him as well at the Latino Film Festival. So a lot of like these connections I made, either people that I might have known, social media, or like the Latino Film Festival. Shout out to Latino Film Festival. I met a lot of people, really dope people this year because of that, and I was able to have him as guests on the podcast. It was really dope. He has a really dope short horror film called Bitter Murmur that he filmed. His brother helped out. They had like a small crew, but it's a really dope short film. Like I really recommend it. I believe he said it might be on streaming already, if I'm not mistaken. But again, really inspirational conversation as well of like his story and how he went into like, decided to make his first short film. So congrats, Manny. And yeah, follow him as well. Follow everybody that I mentioned throughout this episode. This next one, again, I mentioned him earlier with See It on 16 millimeter just a few minutes ago. Trash Mex, Armando. Shout out to Armando. He's been killing it. I found him on IG a couple years ago now. And I was trying to look for like this Mexican film that I love. And he does a lot of like reviews of like really hidden gems, Mexican gems. He calls it Trash Mex, but I won't give it too much away. You got to listen to the interview. Follow him on social media. He's also been killing it with screenings. He's bringing back like that, Mexican cinema. He made it a trend. Even people want to copy him. But I know that he was the originator of bringing that back to like the big screens. So really proud of this dude. He killed it this year as well with See It on 60 millimeter. They collabed on stuff. So shout out to Armando. Next one here is the homie Eddie from Popcorn Reef. Shout out to him. I think I just came across his stuff on Instagram as well. I just saw that he was doing a lot of dope film screenings as well. I just kept hearing the name like Popcorn Reef, and I'm like, who is this guy or who is this girl? Because I didn't even know who it was. And then I went down the rabbit hole, found out it was Eddie. Kind of wanted to pick his brain on film screenings because I do want to start doing that as well. It's been a goal of mine. And we became good friends, had him on the podcast. He's been killing it as well here in San Diego with his film screenings. He's presenting Attack of the Killer Tomatoes for the film festival here in San Diego. And he has some stuff going on with the 10th Avenue Arts, the Adams Avenue Theater. He's killing it. So shout out to Eddie from Popcorn Reef. If you're here in San Diego, go check out one of his film screenings. Really dope. Next, Casey Final Girl. Really dope horror content creator. Again, I won't give too much away. Check out the interview that we had. She's a huge horror fan as myself. Really dope person as well. I met her through social media. And I really love what she does, her content, all that stuff. She's an author as well. So check her out. Follow her. Really great conversation that I had with her as well. Like I said, all of these episodes are really dope. If you don't want to, I know they're really, some of them are long, some of them like 30 minutes, some of them are to an hour, but I recommend checking each episode. And then the final episode to end the season, which is kind of cool because it foreshadows what I'm trying to do for the next season. And like I said, I'll talk about that more in detail once I'm, done shouting out everybody. But shout out to Manny Bazinski. He's a creative podcaster, co-owner of So Loca, film geek like myself, horror fan. We really had a really dope conversation. Again, really inspirational conversation we had. Check it out. And thank you, Manny, for being on. Really dope dude. His wife too. Shout out to Claudia. Really dope artist, podcaster, creative. They do everything. So shout out to them. But yeah, it's been like a great dope ass season. Like I said, as you saw the recap here, I kind of went longer than I wanted to, but it was kind of hard to keep it short because I kind of wanted to shout out everybody and also like give context how I met some of these people, how they came on to be on the show. And so hopefully I didn't ramble on too much. If not, you can kind of skim through this episode. But yeah, so Manny's episode, he was the first guest on Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue to be in person video. Because like I said, the audio ones were obviously in person, but it was just audio. So he was actually the first guest that I've had on the podcast in person. So it was history being made. So shout out to Manny. And it kind of foreshadows kind of where I want season, I mean, not even just season 6, but like where I see Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue going. I'm still thinking of what I wanted to do. I want to evolve it more than a podcast. I might be changing the way it just your typical podcast would look like. I do want to do more in-person stuff. For those that follow me in general on social media, I have my blog. So I'm always trying to do different things, going to different places, horror conventions, film festivals. Like there's so many things I do want to do, and there's goals that I want to achieve. And so Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue will also grow with me as I try to go into these other creative endeavors. And so I'm still thinking about what it's going to look like. But for sure, one thing is that I kind of do want to change the way it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be your typical podcast. I do want to do more in person, but I also do want to keep it virtual for some things because I do want to interview, like I said, other artists, creatives that might not be here locally in San Diego. So I'm still trying to think about it. If you have any ideas, what you would like to see, I'm always open for that as well. You can comment below. Let me know what you think, what you would like to see. And I can also, take that into consideration because I'm always willing to listen to suggestions. But I just want to thank everybody for tuning in for this episode and for any of the episodes that you guys tuned in. I really appreciate it. I do this because I love music and movies. Like I said, where genres have no borders. And it's been a great journey so far, getting to know all these artists, creatives throughout these past years. Like since I started like 2019, so it's like what, 2020, 21, 22, 23, like 4 years, almost 5 years. So thank you guys. And yeah, stay tuned to see what happens next. I'll pretty much be placing all that stuff most likely in my social media of what's going to happen. But this is the final episode of season 5, Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue. It's been a great ride, and I hope more dope things happen. As you saw through this episode, it was a lot of manifestation that happened because a lot of these people that I wanted to have on, I've been wanting to have on, and I had, or just connections I made. So thank you to everybody that was part of the season, that's been part of the last seasons of Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue. And stay tuned because greater things are coming. Peace.